Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful, Rabbit Hole, and King Dio. With the recent news or recent rumors of Bully being canceled and Bully 2 being canceled and some information regarding like the current state of Grand Theft Auto 6, I thought it was a very, very, very apt time to talk a little bit about the current state of Rockstar Games, and by extension, I suppose, Take-Two Publishing, who I believe is their parent company. I'm not really super up to speed about like how this company is structured or anything like that because I don't care about Rockstar. They were always trash. They were always pure shit and essentially ruined gaming from 2002, 2001 to up until I would say the release to the Switch, in which gaming has entered its new renaissance. Grand Theft Auto almost single-handedly ushered in this age of just games being about realism, about being over-sexualized, about not having any real objective or point to them, about having like content, essentially quantity of content over actual quality. So instead of something like, a high quality 10 to 15 hour game like Ocarina of Time or Super Mario 64, you have this giant sprawling city filled to the brim with people just walking around that you can just kind of mindlessly shoot at and kill. And people are easily amused people find that engaging and fun. I'm not one of them. I've always disliked Grand Theft Auto. I've always maintained my dislike for Grand Theft Auto. But I do think that with Rockstar Games, their inability to put out a sequel to Grand Theft Auto 6, I do think we are reaching the point where Grand Theft Auto, or Rockstar Games in particular, is phasing out and becoming irrelevant. So why do I say that? Why essentially do I think that Grand Theft Auto is done? There are a lot of reasons for this. For one thing, Rockstar Games has been bleeding all of its talent for, I think, for the past 10 years at least. Probably longer than that, because I've been hearing about their warp development cycle since like 2008. But Rockstar Games is becoming very notorious for bringing on from overworking their developers, bringing on a whole lot of contracted employees, working them to death, and then letting them go upon the conclusion of the of the project, and then bringing on new people, right? So what this does is that they don't build up any real talent at their industry. They bring on a bunch of contracted employees, work them to death, to work on a single project, and upon letting them go, these people will never again use their abilities to develop any new interesting ideas at Rockstar Games. Rockstar is essentially using all of their studios, all of their resources, all of their connections, all of their development talent to produce one single project. That is Grand Theft Auto. After Red Dead Redemption 2, I think Red Dead Redemption is done, right? It's never coming back, never in the capacity it was. It was essentially sort of, I don't want to say it's as bad as Fallout 4, because what possibly could be, but it's the same general decline, right? Like, it doesn't have the passion, it doesn't have the talent, it doesn't have the appeal it once did, right? It's relatively soulless. It entirely exists because, oh yeah, Western movies exist, and people want to experience games that remind them of that era of filmmaking, right? So Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't interesting, it isn't well made, it isn't engaging, it isn't fun, it isn't creative, it has no real appeal as a video game, but because it has, on the surface level, right, it has this image of presenting itself as being, a game made for fans of the Western genre. People kind of latched onto it, right? Grand Theft Auto is the same way with crime, right? The games aren't good, they aren't inventive, they don't innovate, they don't do anything new, but at the same time, oh, this is super mainstream, appealing stuff that appeals to like a very certain demographic that does not typically play video games. So, what this means is Grand Theft Auto doesn't have the capacity to improve or really resonate with gamers on a deeper level. And I think we've been seeing this gradual shift in the opinions towards Grand Theft Auto as the decades have gone on. Like people were saying Grand Theft Auto was stale and boring by like the fourth entry, right? Like people had a lot of issues with like that game cutting out planes and cutting out like critical features, cutting out things that were like very much present in fan favorite San Andreas, right? And after that, like releases slowed down, the games became more and more bloated, and they become less and less interesting. And I think more importantly, Rockstar Games stopped producing other titles that were experimental, more niche, and tried having different feels to them. Like they put out like stuff like Bully back in the day, Red Dead Redemption, and these days I would never see that happening because Rockstar Games has reached the point where they are entirely reliant on a single property to stay relevant. Much like Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed, much like Capcom with Resident Evil, much like Square Enix with Final Fantasy, the only thing keeping these companies afloat is a single super franchise that is essentially defines that entire specific genre. In this case, in Grand Theft Auto's case, the open world crime simulator, right? Well, open world police killing simulator, I suppose. I suppose Grand Theft Auto is fundamentally. The cop killing simulator, the Black Lives Matter protest simulator. Right? Grand Theft Auto is just pure trash, right? From a conceptual standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a gaming standpoint. And as more and more franchises start catching up to it, titles like Watch Dogs, titles like Saints Row, titles from endless other franchises, Grand Theft Auto is going to lose more and more of its popularity and appeal. In fact, I would say the only reason it's still going now is because of how big the brand actually is. Like people are still going to buy Grand Theft Auto 6 just because it's Grand Theft Auto 6. But, and I think this opinion is going to become more mainstream in the next 10, 20 years, it will be acknowledged that Grand Theft Auto is stale and boring compared to how it used to be, right? Like, it won't be edgy or radical anymore. It won't be pushing the envelope. It won't be innovative. It won't be cutting edge. Like, Grand Theft Auto will never reinvent itself the way that Zelda reinvented itself with A Link to the Past, or Ocarina of Time, or Breath of the Wild. Like, the developers don't have the talent for it. Instead, what they'll do is they'll do the Call of Duty thing, in which they'll take this franchise and milk it to death. It might take a long time. You might still see Grand Theft Auto games like 50 years from now, but their presence in the industry, the era of them like selling PlayStation 2s, is long over. Like, they're never going to come back. They're never going to return. They're never again going to be relevant.